What's up, everyone? I bought some modern cards, so now I have a little something to do on Magic Online while waiting for the new set to come out. So I bought some Thopter stuff, probably going to buy some Gerry stuff, maybe some Grixis stuff, and hopefully in the next few weeks figure out what blue decks are good in Modern. So we already played Gerry last week. We went 4-1, played against 5 aggro decks, which... I'm trying to build my decks to be good against aggro decks because that is a lot of what Modern is about, at least right now. And now I want to try the Thopter deck. So I top 8 the Invitational with this deck, and no one has picked it up. Basically, just not a single person. And I'm not sure what the deal with that is because I do think this deck is good, but basically, I'm trying to get Thopter Foundry, Sword of the Meek. It is cool in that you can play Thopter Foundry, and then if you have a random artifact lying around, like Engineered Explosives or Talisman of Progress, I also considered playing Darksteel Citadel, and you have a Sword of the Meek in the graveyard. You can just pay 1, sack that artifact, get your sword back, and then once you have Sword and Thopter Foundry in play, it is just pay 1 mana, sack the sword, make a 1/1 flyer, gain a life. So overall, pretty dope combo. Not many decks can actually beat that. There are some decks like Tron or Scapeshift or whatever that just don't really care, and they'll probably just go over the top of you. But against most decks, that is a virtual win. So we're playing a lot of Thopter pieces. We have Muddle the Mixture to find them. We have Thirst for Knowledge, which is obviously good if you have a bunch of artifacts in your deck. I have enough, I think. I considered playing a Compulsive Research over this last Thirst for Knowledge because I definitely wanted a 4th card drawer, maybe even a 5th one. So that is a consideration. But yeah, I just want to basically draw some cards, kill some stuff, and eventually assemble my combo. So we have a lot of ways to actually tutor for it, and we have Thirst and Seer Visions to provide a little bit of velocity in the meantime. So yeah, basically trying to set up this combo. I have some dinky artifacts in my deck to rebuy swords in case I don't end up with a sword in play to go with my Thopter Foundry, which I think is really important. It is probably one of the most important overlooked aspects of the deck. So Talisman of Progress, not the greatest card just in general, but I do like the fact that it can accelerate you into a Wrath of God, and when you're on the play, it is very good with Spell Snare. So you can also just play Colonnade, play a Talisman on 2, and then play a Serum Visions that turn. So I do like the Talismans. They are kind of sweet. They also facilitated my sideboard plan of Elspeth Sun's Champion, which I no longer have, but I still think that they're pretty reasonable. Rest of the deck has just a bunch of removal spells and things to help you not die. So Path to Exile, Spell Snare I think is very, very good in the format right now. There are certainly some decks where it's not great against, but there are very few times when you have a Spell Snare in your hand and it is just completely dead. So I do like playing 3 of these, especially in a deck like this that is constantly playing from behind, just because Spell Snare does a lot to actually help you catch up. So we have a Declaration in Stone, which might seem kind of odd, but I did want a removal spell to Muddle for. Right now, Muddle is not providing a ton of utility outside of just finding Thopter pieces and countering random combo cards. So there could be something like a Mind Spring somewhere in the 75, but there are a lot of bullets in the board to actually Muddle for. Then I have a couple remands, a little bit more velocity, and the fact that Remand is playable in this deck, much like the Nahiri deck, just goes to show what these decks' game plans are. Very much like Splinter Twin, you are not concerned with actually countering or killing every single thing that your opponent plays because that's just kind of a tall order in Modern. So basically I just want Remand to kind of keep them off balance for a little bit, cycle through my deck, and just give me time to assemble my combo because once I assemble my combo, a lot of the cards just get invalidated. So this could be something like Mana Leak, but I highly recommend having Remand, even though Mana Leak is a slightly stronger card in the format. 2 Timely Reinforcements main deck. This was an oversight, and apparently is not in my collection, which is just a bold-faced lie, Magic Online. Timely, yeah, I should have had main deck Timelies. I don't know why I didn't. I think I was too honed in on having multiple Wraths and Detention Spheres, because Detention Sphere was cute in that it could also take out a sideboard Stony Silence. And right now I have Explosives, which is kind of doing that job, but obviously Explosives is not good at killing Stony Silence. So I'm a little weaker to that card right now, but Timely Reinforcements is so good in a deck that is just trying to buy time. Like when I built the Nahiri deck, I was like, oh, Timely Reinforcements, obviously like an auto include in the main deck, but for whatever reason when I was building this deck, I just like didn't even think about that. And the sick thing is that I was looking for things that like made 1/1 creatures, because just having another thing that can get your Sword of the Meek back is like really cool too. So yeah, there might be games where you like cast Timely and you just make 4 power, which might not seem like a big deal, but it is. You know, like if you have a 2/3 and a 1/1, like that can trade with a Wild Nacatl instead of you having to put like all 3 of your tokens on the Wild Nacatl. So I like the fact that Timely actually just rebuys your swords too, which is pretty dope. One thing I remembered is I used to have a Snapcaster Mage, which was like kind of what I used to muddle for if I wanted a removal spell, because typically I would have like a Path or a Wrath that were in the graveyard already, but I do like the fact that Stone can take out like 2 Tarmogoyfs or whatever, and generally it is like if you're muddling for a removal spell, it is because you are very far behind, because if you're kind of like at parity, you can just muddle for a combo piece and just kind of sit for a little bit, but yeah, I like Stone just because it actually like cleans up 2 things potentially. So yeah, Stone I think is pretty good. Timely is definitely very good. And then I have a couple Wrath of Gods, a couple Engineer Explosives. I'm not super high on Explosives just because unless you're killing like 3 1-drops or a couple zeros or whatever, like generally the effect that you get from the Explosives is not worth the mana that you're investing. Like say you kill a Tarmogoyf with Engineer Explosives. That costs you 4 mana to kill their card that costs them 2 mana. So Explosives is not super mana efficient in that regard unless you're actually getting like 2 or 3 cards with it. And even then, if you're killing like 2 zeros against Affinity or something, like then it does feel worth it. If you're killing 2 1-drops against Zoo, again, you're down a mana, but I still think it's worth it. So there are times, like Explosives is pretty hit or miss. I think most of the time it's just kind of like medium minus, but it does do the job of both being this thing that you can use to protect yourself. It combos with Thirst for Knowledge. It's a removal spell that you can pitch to it, which is pretty nice. You can actually set people up in the Academy Ruins lock where if they're just stuck drawing like 1 threat a turn, you can actually just like lock them out with Explosives, which is pretty sweet. And it's a 0 mana artifact that you can play when you have Thopter Foundry too, which is pretty nice. So if you thirst away a Sword of the Meek and you play Thopter Foundry, you can just play Explosives for 0, and it's effectively like you just get the Sword of the Meek in play for free, just because like you spend 0 mana and then you pay 1. And it's like if you have the sword in play, you could just pay 1, sack the sword, to be the same thing as paying 1 and sacking the Explosives. So I like the Explosives in that regard, but not much in general. And then 2 Wrath of Gods. I think Wrath is pretty good in this modern format. Even the decks that are like kind of grindy, kind of combo-y, just like the Abzan Company decks, Wrath is just phenomenal against them. It's very good against the Zoo decks, especially since they're moving more towards like Bushwhacker instead of things like Lava Spike. So I do like Wrath against them a lot. And there are even matchups like Infect, where it's just like sometimes they just kind of have to unload on you, and then you have a Wrath to clean up all their stuff. So Wrath is pretty nice. Also just great against Tarmogoyf decks, so there is that. As for the mana base, I have 24 land. This could very easily be 23, but I don't know. I'm just kind of like, I should almost certainly just have like another colorless land if I'm going to play for 24 also, but I'm being very conservative. I want to make sure that I have enough lands instead of not enough lands, just because once you get Thopter Sword in play, all you really want to do is hit land drops. You kind of just stop doing anything else, so I do have a lot of mana sources. I only have 2 Colonnades, very similar to the Nahiri stuff, where I just don't want a bunch of ETB tap lands, and it is very rare that the 4/4 actually matters, and it's also very rare that you need multiples of these. So I like having 2, not many past that. I don't have a Gifts Ungiven package in this deck. I don't have gifts at all, so the 2 Academy Ruins, 1 Teleria West thing was very much a Gifts Ungiven thing, so I just kind of have like the Miser's Academy Ruins. I also have a Miser's Ghost Quarter. I thought I could afford a couple colorless lands. I could certainly have 2 Academy Ruins, but it is legendary, so that is something to watch out for. Could maybe have another Ghost Quarter. I really like Ghost Quarter against things like Inkmoth Nexus, Raging Ravine, just like any sort of creature land, basically. And it helps against Tron a little bit, occasionally helps against Scapeshift, but most of the time it's there to just pick off a creature land. And then I have like a fetch dual mana base, but it is not super high on fetches. I only have 7. I have 4 Flooded Strands, 2 Tarns, and a Mesa somewhere. There it is. Obviously alphabetical, so it's at the top. And that is to kind of disguise my deck, because I feel like in the early turns, I'm going to look like a Nahiri deck. And I have 2 Hallowed Fountains, which could very easily just be 1 Hallowed Fountain. I have 1 Sacred Foundry, only for Engineered Explosives, and you could do a lot of cute things with this. Like, you could sideboard a red card if you thought you wanted, like, some Crumble to Dust against Tron or something, and maybe that's something I should be doing, but against combo decks, you could also just play a black duel and then have something like a Time Sieve in your sideboard, which I don't know if that's better than like Vendilion Click or Geist or something like that, but it is a card that there are some matchups, like maybe even the Abzan Company decks, where like they gain infinite life, and then what are you going to do with your Thopter Foundry Sword of the Meek? You know, like if you have the Time Sieve, like your loop trumps their loop, and you will kill them eventually. Especially since you have Academy Runes to keep rebuying your artifacts, you can just discard down to hand size, and then keep doing that. So you can do a lot of things with this dual land. Right now, I'm basically choosing to do none of them. And then we have some Glacial Fortresses, have a Mystic Gate. I wanted to play a bunch of basics, so I have 5 islands and 2 plains, so that like Blood Moon is not really a thing against me. I also have Talismans against Blood Moon, which is pretty nice. And I just wanted a bunch of basic islands for like Spell Stare, Serum Visions, Muddle, that sort of stuff. And I didn't want my mana base to deal me a bunch of damage also. So instead of playing like more fetches, more duels, I have Glacial Fortresses and Mystic Gate, and since I have 5 islands, I do like having a Mystic Gate to kind of like backdoor into Wrath of God. I had more Mystic Gates, but I found that when I had like all the gates and like colonnades, and I had Teleria West before, my Glacial Fortresses were actually not free. There were definitely a lot of times where they would actually ETB tapped, which is kind of unacceptable when you're choosing to actually put this card in your deck. So I feel like, especially with 24 lands and only 2 colorless lands, my Glacial Fortresses should be entering untapped the vast majority of the time. So that is basically the main deck. I guess I could talk about Gifts Ungiven, though, because I did cut the gifts, and they felt basically kind of slow, and it also felt like I had too much air between Serum Visions, Muddle, Thirst, and potentially dead Thopter pieces, so something kind of had to go. I enjoyed the velocity aspects of the deck way more than the gifts aspect, and yeah, like I said, gifts were just very, very slow. So I did not like that. The format is just a little bit too fast for it. Ooh, Ancestral is another thing. So a lot of people might be like, oh, you have a bunch of like counter spells and removal spells. Obviously you want Ancestral Visions, but I wrote about this in a few articles when these decks were first starting to get formed and stuff, and basically when your Ancestral comes off, you want to be able to draw a lot of impactful spells. Like, if your Ancestral draws you, like, 3 lands, for example, that doesn't really help you. Like, you just, you know, invested this mana on turn 1, which could have been used to, like, path something or bolt something. And if you end up like, just drawing a bunch of blank cardboard, then it does not help you, because it's just, like, in order for you to, like, be up on your opponent in cards and have that matter, your cards still have to matter. So yeah, if you draw a bunch of lands, basically blank pieces of cardboard, or in this case, like redundant Thopter Foundries, or Sword of the Meeks, or Talismans, or whatever, like there are a lot of bricks that you can draw in this sort of deck. So I am much happier playing things like Thirst for Knowledge and Serum Visions to just go through my deck faster, even though it is less mana efficient. It is more time efficient, and also I'm not looking to necessarily draw hard cards. I'm just looking to assemble my combo. So I found that Ancestral was just not very good in this deck, which I probably should have been able to figure out just by looking at it and thinking about it, but I still had to play some games. So I think that's it for the main deck. I think everything else is like pretty normal-ish. As for the sideboard, I have a couple Sun Lances. These used to be gut shots because I was more worried about Infect and Affinity specifically, but there's not been much affinity, and I think Sunlance is almost as good against Infect. So Sunlance is pretty dope. It is great. It kills Wild Nacatl, and if you play against like Malira Cord, Abzan Company, whatever we're calling it these days, Sunlance is actually pretty good against them too. It does not kill Anafenza. It does not kill Tide Hollow Sculler if they're playing the Logan Mize version. But I do think just like being able to pick off a bird or kill their Malira or whatever, I think is like actually just pretty important. So I do like the Sun Lances. I have a Celestial Purge, which is a nod to Nahiri and Liliana. And I would probably only play one of this card, but it's also tutorable with Muddle, so it kind of feels like I have multiples. I don't have Snapcaster Mage, so like once I use the one, it's just gone. But I think that's okay. I have a third Timely Reinforcements, which is basically the best card against the decks where you would want this. I have a Miser's Leyline. I considered playing more of these. Basically, like, Burn can be kind of tough. You do have some cool aspects against them where you have like Timely and Muddle, which is just like a hard counter against their top deck burn spell. You have Thopter Foundry to actually gain you some life, you know. So like you're not drawing dead in that matchup, at least as much as you would be if you're playing something like Grixis. But at the same time, I did consider playing like a few ley lines in my sideboard, but I was more so worried about the Scapeshift matchup, and I actually don't think that Leyline is like a KO against them, especially because a lot of them are just playing like Primeval Titan now. A lot of them are just like the red-green deck with like Through the Breach and stuff. So Leyline helps, but it doesn't KO them. And when you're planning on the games going like kind of long and you have like Thirst for Knowledges and stuff, like you're going to see a lot of cards and you don't want them to be Leyline of Sanctity. So I think just playing the one, hoping you have in your opener. If you don't have in your opener, maybe you can play it on turn 3, turn 4, and maybe that's good enough. But I kind of like just having the one, so I'm going to try that. A couple of Vendilion Clicks give you a little bit more disruption against combo. And then, like, a lot of this is just a holdover from, like, my Nahiri sideboard, too, or it's just, like, things that I learned from playing Nahiri or, like, cards that I want, like Jace Bellerin. I feel like this is really good in blue matchups. Like, you just tick it up, and then you basically have Howling Mine for a while. Also very good against grindy decks like Jund. A couple Spreading Seas for Tron, Infect, Burn, Zoo. Just like this card comes in a lot of spots. Maybe even against Affinity since we have Wraths. I have 1 Negate, 1 Dispel, which is a little on the low side. At one point, I think I considered playing like 3 or 4 Negates just because of kind of how bad the combo matchups are. But even then, you know, you still need to be able to make your land drops and stuff. So I'm down to a single Negate. Could very easily be a second one. I have a Miser's Dispel, which I like against Cord and Company. Ideally, I would play 2, but I think Cage might just be a better answer. And it's kind of weird to play Cage, honestly, because they're probably going to side in like Abrupt Decays and stuff against you anyway, just to like break up your combo and stuff, which I don't even think is necessarily correct. I think they should just be focused on kind of like combo killing you rather than just like trying to grind you out, because you have inevitability, you know. Anything short of Murderous Redcap is completely beatable, so I don't necessarily like them boarding in Decays, but it is kind of reasonable depending on what their entire sideboard plan is. So like me bringing the Cages doesn't necessarily help, but it does give them something else that they have to decay, which is like fine but not great. It's kind of a loss overall, but this is also good against Dredge, which is like kind of a fringe deck. I think it's more popular on Magic Online, and I am pretty convinced that these Cages are pretty good because I spent like 19 tickets on them, so I hope they're good. I hope they're worth it, but very easily could just be like another Dispel, another Negate. And then I'm pretty sure the Affinity matchup is terrible, but oh no, I just moved my Hurkyl's Recall out of the sideboard. That was the card I was going to talk about. Boom, get back in there. Yeah, I like the Hurkyl's Recall. I think it's a fine Miser's card just to draw into. It's also tutorable with Muddle, but like if you have 5 mana and you're transmuting Muddle for Hurkyl's, then they're probably going to have enough normal lands to just like replay most if not all of their stuff anyway, so it might not even be that good. But we're white and we can't really play Stony Silence because that's how we kill people, is with artifacts. So gotta do something, so I'm playing a Hurk. So basically the Recall, the Leyline, maybe us Sunlands, and maybe the Cages could go, but I'm pretty sold on everything else. So yeah, that's the deck. I think this deck is good. I don't necessarily think it is better than Nahiri, but we'll find out.